Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Eleanor Bunin Monroe Film Center, the Francesca Beale Theater to be precise. I'm Richard Pena, Program Director of the Film Society. On behalf of the Film Society, I'd like to welcome you. This, as you all know, is a brand new facility. This is one of the very, very first programs. In fact, it is in a certain way the first program that we're running in this cinema. And as sometimes when you get something new, not everything is working as well as you might like. So we're a little air conditioning issue going on now. The other day, you could have hung meat in this theater. And today, it's a little, not too bad, but it's not what we want. So we're working on it, and it should be better. Anyway, please, well, thank you for your patience and understanding of that. But we have a great, great show for you that, in fact, I think couldn't be any cooler. So, in fact, it'll make up for any, I think, any kind of shortfalls in the actual temperature here. Seriously, it's so wonderful to have three really great friends of the Film Society. We've had the honor of presenting their films in the New York Film Festival and in our other programs, and it's really, really special to me personally, and I think to the Film Society, to have them here with us for this opening. So please welcome Noah Baumbach and Joel and Ethan Coen.
So today we're going to look at the openings, the beginnings of I think 5 or so of Joel and Ethan's movies, and 3 of mine, and talk about how you open a movie and why you decide to start a movie the way you do. And this was actually Joel and Ethan's idea, and I think it's a really interesting one and a great one to. I'm just sort of curious why you guys came up with this idea, or how you did.
Well, we were, one of the things Noah suggested was, picking some clips from the movies and talking about the clips, and we didn't want to hunt through the movies and find clips. So we decided we would just, the easiest thing, also just from the point of view of the sort of technical aspect of it, was to show the very beginnings of the movies, and that's really, honestly, the reason.
Do you know about Live at Leeds, the history of it, the Who record?
No, the Who record.
They had a van, the Who had a van following, production, the recording van, follow them around for 4 months to record a tour because they were going to put out a live album. And when it got time to pick all the cuts for the album, they all looked at each other and said, "We're not going to listen to all this shit." So they picked the Leeds concert and.
So, well, just keep in mind, there are logos and previews on the DVDs of all these movies, and so lots of effort has gone to cut those out when we show you the clips. Why don't we start with a clip? Should we look at the beginning of Blood Simple? Or what do you think?
Yeah, okay. This is, where should we look at the first 2? What was the beginning of Blood Simple
and No Country, yeah.
In No Country? Let's look at those 2.
Look at those 2.
Well, one of the things you realize after making movies for 25 years is the horrifying sort of realization of how much you repeat yourself.
We thought, not just the once, not the first time, but then again, whatever, 20 years later, that it would be a really good idea to start a movie by having a character that we don't know anything about and haven't seen talk tediously at length about things having nothing to do with the story. Although Cormac's writing is better than ours. What's funny, seeing this with you, what's funny is, I don't know if it's misguided or not, but what's funny is how diametrically opposed it is to what you do. I don't know if you want to go out of order or not, but you could look at Margot at the wedding for like the total diametric opposite in terms of, starting a movie with a whoosh and not explaining anything.
Yeah, well, maybe we look at that in a second. I was also this is going to sound maybe like I'm being funny, but I'm not. Is that also a major difference is that you start with the title "No Country for Old Men" before the tedious monologue over the and in Blood Simple you wait and you hold it and reveal it on the rush.
Yes.
But for me, there's always a kind of an emotional idea of when the title should come.
Oh, definitely. No, I was going to say that's an interesting, totally different, interesting thing, which is how you design the actual graphic of the title into the beginning of a movie, and whether or not it's just, like Woody Allen does, is just, boom, it's there on a black screen, and then the movie starts, or if it's somehow, there's a scene that precedes it, or no, that's true.
Well, there becomes an anticipation of the title too, and and also you run the actors' names over the car, so there's also, which I guess was more a style back then than it has become later.
Right.
Right. Actually, we've done that a few times, just actors as opposed to all the credits that are traditionally in the head credits, just because sometimes you want a shorter head credit sequence than longer, and they've kind of proliferated over the years, the credits that go at the head of the movie.
Right,
you
have to use way more people. On Greenberg, which we also have, I did deliberately run all the credits in the beginning of the movie in a kind of old-fashioned way. But another thing I was thinking about Blood Simple is, I feel like you guys, it's almost like you came to movies fully formed. Like there's everything is right about that. There's the sound is amazing. The cutting's amazing. This was your first movie, and you'd raised the money totally independently, right, from dentists and.
Yeah, dentists and scrap metal yard people, and mostly entrepreneurs, small business people. Yeah.
And can you talk, both of you, about where you were right before you made this movie, where you were coming from, what when you had this script and you knew you wanted to make the movie, but sort of, because I think there is a feeling, I feel almost more so than, I don't know, more so than most filmmakers. I always feel like a first movie feels like a first movie in some way, and I feel Blood Simple could almost be, you could have made it at any point.
Well, it's funny. When I watch it, it feels very much like a first movie. To me, just from a lot of different points of view. Some of them technical, just because when you're first starting out, you don't really know what you're doing that way, and other, also for other reasons. But where we were right before we made it was, I was, we were writing together, and we were writing for other people, and I was working as an assistant editor, mostly on low-budget splatter movies, like horror movies here. And the Blood Simple does sort of owe a lot to that. It came out of it to a certain extent, because we were watching a lot of them and working on a lot of them and thinking about them, and they were sort of the movies that were being made independently on that model, as for-profit ventures, going out and trying to, raise money from people with an equity stake in the movie who would be doing it because they were expecting to make money on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of where that was at.
It's nice of you to say it looks good or accomplished for a first movie, but I'm kind of with Joel, and it's sort of hard to look at. I get the first movie thing off of it strongly. They're like you kind of get the excitement about the ideas, and they're just, none of them are done terribly well. Yeah. You get the actors' names coming out of that light buys, and but it's a little crappy looking, and the sound is meant to be kind of ominous, and yeah, but it's not quite. It's
Well,
all.
the other thing about Blood Simple is we almost never watched these things once they're finished. But we had to watch it about 10 years ago or 15 years ago when Fran was given something or other somewhere. And I was absolutely appalled at how it was edited. And so we actually went back and we cut it. But we went back in and we cut out about 7 or 8 minutes of the movie. Just because I thought, well, in the intervening 10 or 15 years, we'd learned something about editing. So we shortened it radically.
Interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, but actually I'm just remembering, we didn't script that introduction to Emmett Walsh character's voiceover, right? We cut the movie and then felt like we wanted to add. Yeah, it was conceived and shot after the fact of, having shot the rest of the movie.
But another thing that I noticed, like looking at these too, was that they both had this idea. One of the ideas was this idea of controlling the disclosure of the principal characters through an extended sequence. So you didn't see that we then sort of really did repeat, but in a different way on No Country, that you don't see Javier's face until that one overhead shot where he's strangling the deputy. And this was the same thing where we were going, well, let's deliberately keep these characters and let's shoot it all from behind. Let's keep them sort of rim lit and not actually see them until they stop and the light changes. So that was sort of a way of sort of bringing you into the story or making you want to, I don't know, engendering something in the audience that as a beginning that we were sort of thinking about in both places.
And how did Blood Simple start in the script? What was the beginning?
With that driving stuff, the two characters talking, the rear driving
but
shot.
Not the Emmett Walsh.
Not the Emmett Walsh monologue, no.
And was No Country the same? Was that how you imagined it from the beginning?
No, that was how that was actually scripted. That was how we imagined it from the beginning. It was all kind of a funnily different exercise leading to the same kind of thing, a different exercise because, of course, it was based on a novel. It wasn't something we came up with. And the novel is half monologue by the Tommy Lee Jones character, by the sheriff's character. So the kind of beginning of thinking about how to write the script was kind of grappling with the how much of that monologue are we going to put into the movie. The answer being very little, but starting the movie with it.
Do you talk maybe a little bit about voiceover? I mean, just something that you've used a lot. It also, and there's always that decision when you're adapting a book. Also, are we going to cheat by using voiceover? Or are we going to actually try and put this into dialogue? And I mean, in Blood Simple, obviously, it's a motif of a kind of noirish motif, but sort of talk about, you've used voiceover a lot. Raising Arizona has voiceover too in the beginning.
We've used it a lot. Actually, the last one we did, True Grit, also adapted from a novel, which was also told entirely in first person, as opposed to No Country for Old Men, which was half and half, first person and third person. True Grit also starts with monologue, the narrating the main character's monologue, introducing the movie in both instances. Voiceover, maybe, I'm just thinking maybe it's not cheating because you suggested that it is, but maybe we have them go on about things that aren't related to the main story because if they're not actually doing narrative work, then it's not cheating.
Right, that's true. You're making it harder for yourself.
Yeah. Although we did cheat in True Grit, as she does sort of do a lot of stage setting.
Yeah, no, it's all stage setting.
Yeah.
And can you talk about sound is such a big part of your movies, the sort of sound in the beginning of these movies, in No Country, it's sort of the placid, just the wind and it's ominous, but it's also, depending on how you want to look at it, it's either ominous or it's peaceful. And the sort of rush of the car and Blood Simple, and how much of that stuff do you guys plan, do you know when you're shooting or in the script stage even? I mean, I would guess you know.
I think it really it differs from movie to movie quite a bit. How much of the actual sort of sound design is built into the sort of planning stages or the script. It was very, I don't think in No Country and in Blood Simple it was particularly prominent in the script. When we did Barton Fink, it was very much sort of on our mind. But a lot of that was sort of story stuff, because it was a lot about what the character hears and what's the character hears that is real and isn't real, and listening through walls and that sort of thing. So I think most of the time when it isn't story related, it's not so much in the script, and then you just kind of proceed by. Do you write a lot of sound design elements into the scripts that you write?
Not really. I feel like sound is something I had to learn as I made. That's why I'm impressed with Blood Simple, even if you feel like you would have done a lot differently. But I felt like also the way sound is, the sort of sound designers. When I started making movies, it was almost like they were picked for me. And so I would go to the stage and suddenly you're mixing the movie and you kind of liked how it sounded in the crappy version if you were cutting on film or on the computer, and then suddenly it's being expanded. And I always felt like I was kind of like figuring it out at the moment. Do I like that? And there's also, they tell you need to loop a lot of stuff where you replace the dialogue and then I learned as I made movies that actually I liked the crappy sound better, or what stuff that to me had emotion because it was recorded on the day, and so I try not to loop anything anymore. And then also know who I'm working with. I mean, you guys have worked with Skip Livesey, right? For
actually, literally every movie, starting with our first one, we've worked with the same sound designer. Yeah, Skip Livesey.
And can you talk about, how you work with him? Because you really involve him from the beginning, right?
Yeah. In fact, on the first movie, we had enough money to hire Skip for about 2 weeks, and he worked for about 6 months. So he literally, we kid with him that he really almost owned the movie by the time we were done. He worked a really long time on it, and most of it just sort of, and actually, probably to a certain extent, or to a large extent, I would say, we sort of learned about sound design from Skip on that movie. I have to say, that's because he was, it wasn't just sort of a guy coming in to sort of do a job, on a low-budget movie quickly and sort of pro forma. It probably started with him. That the music in Blood Simple was also somebody that we've worked with on every movie, which is Carter Burwell. And although there really isn't any music in No Country, so he did an end credit cue essentially.
Also, not to sound like an old timer, but I think we learned a lot from Skip by virtue of it being at that point still all, and actually for our first few movies, analog and mag, and we actually, you actually cut sound, and we saw reels being assembled, and mixing was, it was all a different thing than it is now, and easier to see what was going on in a way.
Right. Well, I feel like and now though you can really mix a movie almost before you go to the stage, whereas before you really had to wait to kind of get it all assembled, and now you really can mix it and then just almost just formalize it on the stage, which I find I prefer because there's less pressure, because I'm always like have just like 5, whatever it is, there's like 5 days on the stage and you're terrified you're gonna
right. As with everything digital, it's more efficient, and that's kind of hard to argue with. Right. It's all faster.
Maybe we'll take some, if anyone has any questions, just because we'll be leaving these movies and moving on to other movies. And
I think it was at the press conference at the New York Film Festival for Miller's Crossing. Somebody in the audience suggested that you should make a musical musicals, and I think at that time you had started shooting Barton Fink, and I think you said at the time that you had very unpleasant experience having to work with playback. I think maybe in the USO sequence in Barton Fink, that you guys really didn't like playback, and that's why you would never consider making a musical. I was just wondering if that was still true. It's been so many years in the interim.
That's funny. I don't remember the playback being especially vexed in the USO scene. It was kind of another thing to
there
deal
was
with.
a flood, but beyond that.
Yeah, they can't play the playback for that. Well, we did, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou had a lot of music in it, which was a mix of everything, live performance, on-camera performance, and a lot of playback. And it's funny we said that because no, it wasn't especially.
Well, sometimes you just make stuff up in interviews, and then it gets quoted back to you. And yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't remember saying that or why we may have said it, but yeah, I mean, there's certain cumbersome aspects of production you actually just get used to. The first time you sort of work with them, you go, well, this is an almighty drag, but then you just, it's just part of life. You get used to it. But yeah, we use quite a bit of playback on Oh Brother.
And you're working on a movie now that is going to have music too, right?
Yeah, but I don't know that it will have any playback.
Yeah, it'd be mostly live, I think. Mostly or all.
Yeah, it's we're working on a movie now that has music in it, but it's pretty much all performed live, single instrument. So, I don't think although it's hard to tell. I mean, it's possible.
Since we are talking about beginnings, and again, not to get ahead of ourselves, but it is kind of, Margot at the wedding. We're doing a Noah
Should we
movie.
want to show Margot at the wedding?
Yeah. It's right. Noah should be doing it. We should actually.
I know. Well, when we made A Serious Man, for months we were calling it The Squid and the Whale 2.
There was some talk that I would do commentary on it, I think, at one point, as if it was a sequel. Should we look at Margot? We'll look at the beginning of Margot. You'll get to see that Paramount Vantage logo again.
Yeah, no, it really is. As I said, it's funny how diametrically opposed it is to the two of ours that we just saw. It's kind of great that getting plopped down in the middle and not explaining anything.
Well, the other thing is, it's using you're in the train, so everything's crushed in, which is great right up until the point where you just stop the clip when you go outside. But that sort of extended sequence where everything has to be super close, and it feels like you're crushed right in next to the characters.
Yeah, I mean the idea was to. I'd done it. It was to go further with something I guess I did with Squid and the Whale also, which starts right in the middle of a tennis game, and was to do exactly that, is put you right in the middle of something and have to figure it out as you go, and figure out where they're going and why they're going, and then in some ways the whole movie you're figuring it out that way. And it was also a movie unlike again diametrically opposed to No Country, or where there's no establishing shots, so everything is crushed. And another thing I'd say is thing you learn, which I did not know on my first movie, and when I put it on DVD, I corrected this, is that you don't have to use the music that accompanies the logo that the studio gives you. And I noticed on both of our cases, we did not use the clicking of the Paramount Vantage logo.
Yeah, it is weird. It's one of the weird things where right, things that you thought were sort of mandated by God, or you can actually control.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
You just my first movie, Kicking and Screaming, was done with this video company called Trimark, which had the crassest sort of. Trimark was actually called Trimark because it was sounded like TriStar, but the guy who ran the company's name was Mark. And the logo was this like electric jaguar in a triangle, and it had a growl, and I was always hated that I used it, but then I took it out. Should we look at two more? What should we show next of your guys?
I don't remember what we had up next. Was it Big Lebowski? And
I don't remember. We had a couple of pairs.
yeah, I think we had the Big Lebowski next. Is that right?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Oh my God. Yeah. Narrator tediously and at length. Yes.
Feels like a spinning ball. Yeah.
It's like thinking about something universal.
Yeah.
That little colored
Uh,
ball.
Do we have a? Should we talk? We should fill space.
Well, we were very definitely at in the Big Lebowski. Whoa. That was that was a case where we were specifically thinking about the beginning of The Third Man, where you have a narrator that you don't know who the hell he is, actually never makes an appearance in the movie.
The end, I guess you should.
Yeah, in our movie, we did bring the narrator in just kind of as a floater. But
Yeah, but the third man is interesting because it is a kind of character voice. You think you're going to meet him, but you don't.
Right.
So that was right. Another sort of attempt to do a voiceover along those, along those lines. And
It's kind of, it must be the ne plus ultra of something because we actually have, it must be a first in Hollywood, the narrator who loses his train of thought. I don't know if we've done, have we done voiceover since then, or was it? Oh, we had True Grit.
Of course.
Yeah.
They've all been much more together.
And
Oh, and the man wasn't there.
Even Sam Elliott would, when he was on the set, we had a couple of weeks of rehearsal, and Sam was there, and he kept saying to us, "I don't know why I'm here. I'm happy to be here. Don't get me wrong." But he was, no idea what I'm doing in this movie.
do you want to talk about? That's it. Yes, we want to see. Okay, we can show it. Okay. And then I was going to say you talk about Los Angeles for this movie. Then. Something strange about the picture, but
Yeah, two L.A. movies.
both of the same concept of making. You think it's in reverse though, because yours seems like you're out in the desert somewhere, and then you go up to this show that it's actually a urban setting, and this is the urban fog, and then just right next to it.
The trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. I ripped you off in reverse.
Yeah. Well, everything's kind of reverse again. You kind of put us into the middle of it without explaining anything.
And you also you framed a shot that was sort of graphically planned to carry titles.
Right. And in this case, I actually had a different beginning in the script, which was she was at a singing class, and I shot it, but we'd done a lot of this stuff in sort of prep. We shot a lot of people doing errands and walking dogs, which is throughout the movie, Ben's character. And so when we had that shot, I realized I liked it for the reason that it sort of told L.A. in a very quick way, and so I changed the opening of the movie when we cut it. But I did have the whole thing designed, and I actually put more credits. I put people who usually don't have front credits in the front credits, so I could have more driving and play more of the Steve Miller song. And I did I was sort of trying to do like a '70s credit sequence of and
I like the way the music bangs in and then bangs in with the car, but bangs out with the
and I kind of cribbed the Midnight Cowboy lettering. It's slightly different, but the font is sort of similar to that. We would talk about sort of Los Angeles for Big Lebowski.
Well, again, it's funny how diametrically opposed they are, because our LA is very filtered. It's, we're thinking about, obviously, Raymond Chandler is that kind of story, and your LA is very real. Something we would never do. Although, again, the one we're about to do, you should be doing.
Well, it's also, if you shoot a movie in LA, you have to do something with it, because you have, it's because everything's shot in LA. So
right.
you have to find some way of sort of off the bat, sort of, making your own point of your LA-ness.
Right.
But
and also because we go there, and we've all lived there at different times, but we go there to work or make things. So you're also trying to make a city out of a place that you really do use functionally.
Right. Right. You have to sort of then bend it into whatever the specific needs of the story are in terms of the setup. It's But it also, the other thing that strikes me about just the two strategies of how you bang into the story and how you and then some of the sort of more formal sort of shenanigans that we get up to. It is, you're always, in one degree or another, in starting, you're looking for some kind of tension between having your bearings and not having your bearings in terms of what's going to follow. And what that sort of recipe is, or what the balance is part of what you sort of, one way or the other, you find yourself thinking about, even if you're not thinking about it exactly in those terms. So, even in Margot and in this, you sort of plunge right into the story, but you're not, where are you in it, And with some of the stuff that we've done, you're specifically saying, look over here while we're doing, something else is happening over here, or,
Right. Well,
it's a different kind of indirection.
In a way, it makes when the people jump him in his house, that it's almost more surprising because the movie's been so set up and introduced him and shown him, told you who he is, and then suddenly something's out of your control.
Right. Yeah. So yes, it's right. It's meant to be a sort of shocker. It's meant, and also it's a sort of second beginning, in a way. But
there's also something, in the voiceover, the choice of I had, my feeling when I first saw No Country, I remember, was that I had the feeling that anything could happen at any point, but that I was totally in good hands, which is sometimes you see a movie where you feel like they could just take advantage of you, and it's a horrible feeling because you don't want to. You feel like they could kill anyone at any point. But I felt such tension from the very opening of No Country, but it's sort of the comedy version of that in Lebowski.
Yes, well, we did know that we were staging that scene that we sort of was at the end of the clip, that if we did that right, then people would be afraid of Javier for the rest of the movie. It was very, how do you make people uptight about this guy? That was definitely,
yeah. Is any, take some questions on the back there?
we asked Cormac McCarthy, who visited the set a couple of times, to pronounce it for us. What did he say? Chigurh?
Chigurh.
Chigurh?
He said it was, it was a name that he came up with intentionally to confound any attempts to trace it ethnically or even in pronunciation. He wanted it to be, completely alien.
Wondering if there's any difference in your approach to how you introduce sort of your heroes versus your villains.
No,
I don't know. We think about it in those terms. You think about it in terms of how you're going to get the story going or introduce these characters, as opposed to this character is a hero or a villain, so he has to be introduced in this or that way. I don't think we really think about it that way. It's all kind of specific to the story as opposed to specific to the character type.
You've talked a lot about the idea of jumping right into the story, not having an establishing opening. I'm wondering, how much of that are you kind of counting on having a film literate audience that, on the one hand, they've come to expect certain kind of conventional openings, so you want to start with something that's not what they expected, but then on the other hand, they're going to recognize, oh wow, this is a very novel way of opening a movie.
The balance between being different
Yeah.
and then people knowing you're trying to be different.
Well, there's something to that. I mean, the best example of that actually is something that we haven't shown yet, which is the beginning of Burn After Reading, because, we would think, we thought, we are never going to make a movie that starts with a little, clacking teletype kind of letters coming up that say, CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. And then we thought, well, why not? It's, so there's.
Yeah, because we would never do it became a reason for doing it. But your movies are more difficult that way. I mean, in terms of, well, not difficult, demanding for the audience. In terms of they're not observing any convention. You don't know where you are. And that's what's kind of, the thing of Greta in the car is kind of the ultimate of that. It's a long hold where she's not doing anything, and you're saying, and again, it is another kind of weird interaction or controlling of the disclosure. You're going, who is she, and why am I looking at this, and who is she, and then who is she, and the other, who the characters are is the story, is the kind of exercise.
The other interesting thing about that beginning is that aside from the shot in the car, everything else is very long lensy and observational. So even the shot of her in the store is past a bunch of cars and you see just her back, It's only the shot in the car that you feel like it's that doesn't have that strange telephoto quality to it.
Which was partly by necessity, because the way I wanted to, I just stole all that stuff. I mean, she was really at the farmer's market with real people, and really we brought clothes to that cleaners and had her go pick it up, and so that guy is really talking to her. So I was trying to do, again, sort of inspired by a certain kind of 70s aesthetic of Midnight Cowboy and a lot of that long lens stuff of getting people really in the environment, and you can do that in LA. Greta, people didn't recognize her, but like we did it with Ben Stiller also, where we put him in, not really interacting with clerks, but we put him on the street for real and had him go in and out of places, and so that was sort of partly why that stuff is long lensy, because we were in some stealth van, looked like a terrorist van with like a black curtain that we would shoot. But there's this thing with Ben later in the movie where he's walking through by a Jewish temple with a number of Orthodox Jews, and and there are takes where they all notice him and pulled him inside and gave him wine.
Make him say the Shema.
Yeah.
But it is all Right. It might have been by necessity, but kind of by choice by necessity. Because as
Yeah.
you say, the font obviously is by choice, and it's all the fact that it feels like Joe Buck walking down the street on a really long lens is kind of what you're after. It's not
Yeah,
just-
well, I like for the outside stuff. I like that because I think on some level it tells you that it's stolen in a way without telling you. I mean, I think with that sort of, I mean, just in reference to that question about starting a movie, throwing you into a movie and not telling you what's going on. I mean, I was doing an interview for Greenberg, and somebody pointed out that she says, "Are you going to let me in to the car?" And that's really about what the movie's about, just emotionally letting someone in. And I had no idea that was set up that way. I mean, I must have, but I didn't. And with Margot, the idea of like him sitting next to a woman he thinks is his mother, but is not his mother, was sort of the idea to somehow set that notion. So more working on, I guess, rather than plot or story, it's some kind of sense, some feeling of what's in store for you.
Right. And you're right. You're proceeding just by instinct in terms of what you know the story is going to be about.
Right.
Yeah, what feels right. Yeah.
But then, of course, you have to keep dropping story points quickly as you go because otherwise you're going to lose people.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see those clips of your movies without the narration, because I don't see that it wouldn't be any less funny, introducing the Big Lebowski, or it would be any less dramatic, more or less dramatic, if you just, saw the openings without the voiceover. So it just reminds me why I don't like voiceovers, because you rather see the characters and get to know them, and you establish them pretty well. So is it just to draw the audience in, or is it just a gimmick, or?
It is a gimmick in a way. Yeah. It's yeah. It's a gimmick to a certain extent. It's a crutch to a certain extent. It's true when you're doing a literary adaptation. There's this huge temptation to sort of try and draw in verbatim something that is you take in a sort of really deep way from the book. I mean, it's all those things. It's also, it's a formal thing that it can also be very resonant, and you can fall in love with it maybe a little bit too much. And one of the leading practitioners of it, of course, is Terry Malick, who does, almost the last movie is pretty much no dialogue, all voiceover, in one way or the other. He's kind of distilled it into something, and he has his own, it's got a very sort of idiosyncratic feel, his voiceovers do. I mean, you always know the language and the way he uses them and all of that. So it's not, I mean, there are different ways of using it. It can be very sort of straightforward, and then it can be, and then it can be something else. It can just have a different flavor. Like I say.
Yeah, in our case, in a couple of cases, or at least a few, it also, somehow it's a hallmark of, hard-boiled fiction. It's I mentioned Raymond Chandler in connection with The Big Lebowski, but also Blood Simple is kind of a noir thing, and it's really a big part of the convention of those movies, but also the novels they were based on were usually told in first person, and then the tellers, the guy who's narrating, his voice is such a big part of the convention. We also did a movie called The Man Who Wasn't There with that started with a voiceover. Actually, that had voiceover in a couple of places throughout, but there was also kind of a film noir. So it's partly by virtue of the genre too.
Down there.
Yes, you mentioned formal shenanigans earlier. We were talking a lot about stylistic choices and so on. And I raised this question because I'm a film professor, and we teach our students a certain trick, and that is that camera movement left to right is kind of a positive gesture because it goes with the movement of our natural movement of our eyes, because we read from left to right. And that if you want to create a little unease in the audience, you move the camera right to left, or you have the characters move that way. this up because in Greenberg, the opening shot pans from right to left, and then you have that long, long take of the character in the car going left to right. So I've never been able to ask practicing filmmakers whether they know about this, whether they take it into account, whether they use it, or it's just how you shoot the scene, or that was the way the traffic went, or whatever.
I'm going to think differently the next time I make a movie. Yes, the deliberate unease that I'm putting you at. That's just because that's where the path was that she was. Yeah, that's interesting. Did you know that about the left to right?
No, it sounds like a Walter Murch idea.
Yeah. Did Walter Murch?
No, it sounds like one.
Oh yeah.
No, I've never heard that either. In fact, one of the interesting things about, people ask how we work together, and we do storyboards, and we set up all the shots together and all the rest, and one of the things that people notice constantly is that if I want to pan or have a character move right to left, Ethan sees it left to right, or vice versa. So we think pretty similarly, but often conflict in terms of screen direction, which is we've always considered to be completely arbitrary.
It is funny though that you get the picture in your head and it seems right, and the other way, although it's totally arbitrary, Joel seems like totally wrong-headed. We actually get long discussions about it.
Yeah. I'm not sure that has a consistently sort of, one is, Mall and one is right. You know what I mean? One is the sinister as opposed to the.
Well, I guess with a serious man, maybe right to left because you're reading Hebrew.
Right. There's that.
Would be more actually would be the reverse concept, because that would feel more natural.
Right. In Semitic countries, the law is reversed.
Right. That's why these movies play differently in different. Should we look at what do we have? Burn After Reading, is that next, or what do you? You don't remember?
I think we talked about that one. I don't think did we have anything else?
You have True Grit. What do you have?
Did we have True Grit?
Yeah, okay.
Well, maybe we should look at Burn After Reading, just because not another voiceover.
Yeah, let's look at Burn After.
We'll look at Burn After
Reading.
This is a rare example of our not using a voiceover.
It's totally Sidney Lumet. Chiva was like a pig in shit. He really enjoyed that.
But the opening is almost like a Tony Scott kind of.
Yeah, Tony Scott. Yes, we talked about Tony Scott a lot when we were doing the movie. Yes, we did, actually.
I mean, in a way, all the movies have they're referential. I mean, the openings are referential to some other genre or feeling, at least, of another. You have a sense of like okay, this is a noir, or this is, but then immediately you get a sense that this is your version of it.
Do you? We're not trying for that, believe me. We're trying for Tony Scott.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You think it's a Tony Scott. I'm talking about this one. I was talking about Blood Simple, but you think it's a Tony Scott movie, but quickly you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, that's true. I mean, as I said before, we did think, well, we'll never do a movie that starts that. I mean, we thought, well, why not? And then we tried to do one. I mean, beyond that, the desire is to do it, really do it, take it on and do it. And then but then it becomes, just because it's more interesting to think about, it becomes more interesting if you sort of say, well, then what if the information that they find is, and that the whole movie about it is just rubbish, So so then yes, it does become more of a
Right.
More of a sort of, to a certain extent, it's like you're saying, okay, we're trying to take it on, we're trying to do it, but then it is a sort of, whatever you want to call it, a sort of subversion of maybe what you expect or what
well,
you
it's
used
Tony
to
Scott,
see.
except the people are knuckleheads.
Right.
But it's so funny you say that, because we did on the set constantly with Chivo. We would say, setting up a scene, what would Tony do? Really. I must say also, with regard to the beginning, we were so excited about, Carter's score is really great. And we talked with Carter about what would Tony do. We were so excited about the koto drums, the huge Japanese drums. Their show in town, I think they play at City Center, is fantastic. These Japanese guys in the little loincloths and their bodies are rolled up, and they hit these huge fucking drums. It's a really great show. But it was so disappointing. We recorded in London in Abbey Road, and the day came to do the koto drums, and these two pasty English guys show up in cargo pants. It sounded really good. I mean, it sounds great. It's one of those movie magic things where...
Let me take some more questions.
You guys have your ensemble of actors. Of course, there's lots of other people thrown in, but you seem to like to use certain people over and over again. And I noticed, except for your wife, I guess, you don't do that. And can you talk about the distinction between you kind of like enjoy exploring new people, and you kind of like have certain people that you fall back on, and yet they are very different in each film. Talk a little bit about how that works for each of you.
You could also expand it to crew too. I mean, you've worked with a lot of the same people. Yeah, we talked about Skip, but I mean, Roger Deakins, and I mean, you've worked with the sort of there is that thing when you make movies of wanting you want the people you know and are comfortable with, but then I think sometimes the people aren't available, or you feel like you want to try something different, and those. So trying to find that balance of not getting too comfortable. I mean, Chivo, this is the only movie Chivo did with you, right? So you had...
Yeah, I think the relationship with the DP is especially sort of that way. You've worked with Harris a lot.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I used a lot of the same crew on the last three movies. Harris, Savides shot Margot and Greenberg, and the same production designer on two of them. A lot of times it's if someone's not available. I mean, now I think you sort of get to a point where you have your people that you want to use. In terms of actors, I mean, I like working with the same people. I guess now that you say it, though, that they all are sort of different. But I'm going to work with Ben again. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of think of myself as I work with the same actors, but I guess I don't.
It's always a combination, obviously, because you can't, and it's, I mean, in our case, I don't know if this is the case with you, but in our case, we often write with specific, not always, but with specific actors in mind, and then we tend to, obviously you tend to then write for people that you know, and you not necessarily need to have worked with them before or know them personally, as sometimes it's just by reputation or because of their work. You're familiar with their work. We do that too, but I'm wondering if that's something, like if you're working with Ben again, is it something that you wrote with Ben?
The last thing I wrote, I actually I knew Ben would be in, so then I thought of Ben, but I actually don't generally think of actors when I'm writing. I mean, I do throughout think who could play this and have ideas, but I don't really write for them. Maybe partly it's protective, because I feel if I don't get them, then what do you do? But you guys, I mean, you've worked with a ton of different actors too, though. I mean, but you've obviously Fran's done a lot of them, and you've worked with Clooney in the last few. But I mean, but you've also had a lot of different people.
Yeah, and adaptations that we've done have been, generally speaking, even if we have ended up using the same actors, generally speaking, written because the characters are presented to you in an adaptation, written without sort of regard to who's necessarily going to play them, from our point of view. But in stories that we're sort of coming up with ourselves, it's frequently the case that we write for specific people. Although I have to say, the thing that we're doing now is not, we're not thinking about anybody specifically, actually, for any of the parts, which is kind of unusual for us.
A Serious Man you'd really cast too, didn't you? I mean, you auditioned a lot of.
Yes, A Serious Man, we knew we wanted to cast that essentially with all unknown actors. Cast it with people that people wouldn't recognize. I'm trying to think of any of the parts in that.
Yeah, I don't think any of them. I don't think we knew when we finished the script. I don't think when we put down the script, I don't think we knew who would play any of those parts.
Stepping away from your own films for a minute, what's your favorite opening sequences in other people's films?
Everybody's favorite is Once Upon a Time in the West, right?
Yeah, well, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's everybody's.
Yeah. It's a 20-minute, what is it, a 20, 30-minute title sequence? It's really a great piece of filmmaking.
Yeah. The opening, well, an LA movie I think we both looked at. I think you guys looked at for Lebowski, and I looked at for Greenberg. Is The Long Goodbye. It has that great opening with Elliot Gould and the cat. Going out to get the cat food and trying to trick the cat into eating the other cat food before he goes out.
Yeah, curry brand cat food.
Right. And he had a clicker the whole time. This is the way to get the cat to do stuff. That's a good one.
You know, there's one
Did you
really
look at that
obscure
movie?
one. Long Goodbye?
Yeah.
I don't think we looked at it right before we made it, but it was very much in our minds when we were making the movie.
Sorry, Ethan, go.
Yeah.
There's an obscure one. It was Stacy Keach in the 70s. It was called Doc, about Doc Holliday. All we've seen is the opening, which is really good. So I don't know why we haven't seen the rest of the movie. But
That's a whole other subset of categories. Is movies you've only seen the beginning of. Anybody else?
oh, Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, also with Stacy Keach. Bad Bob.
Another subset is the Stacy Keach movie. Yeah.
Basically, you start with Stacy Keach and you can't go wrong.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wondered, when I heard you were going to talk about the openings of your films, I was very excited about that, and it didn't occur to me that you were doing it just because it's the easiest way to do it. I thought beginnings are always so hard. That's what people talk about. The hardest thing to make happen is what's the beginning, what's the end. And I work mostly in factual stuff, in long-form broadcast, and lately some documentaries. And they're verite, so you shoot a lot of stuff, and then at the end you put it together and you figure out what goes first. And it's not necessarily what you thought it was at the beginning. And I wondered, is it different with the kinds of movies that you make? Do you always know how it's going to start, or do you end up sometimes using a scene that you thought was going to be 2/3 of the way through the movie as your beginning?
I think I can safely say no, we never have done that. And yes, we always know. Now, the beginning can change in certain ways. I mean, you can, but they're relatively small ways. I mean, the way we sort of imagine the beginning, just formally, the shot of In True Grit changed on the set because purely for technical reasons, because we couldn't get smoke to hang in the air the way we wanted it to. It was really that simple, and so we had to rethink how the shot was going to be. But no, I don't think there's any case where...
Well, actually, there's the one we just, Blood Simple. We came up with that sort of after the fact. But that is the only, as we mentioned, but I think that is the only case. And you mentioned Greenberg.
Yeah, the Greenberg beginning was different, but it was the same basic. Her doing errands was the beginning, but it was just different shot. but the other two, Margot and Squid and the Whale, were as written. Do we have a serious? What do we have left up there? Do we have a serious man up there? Is that did you?
I think
Yeah. So maybe one to see a serious man and Squid and the Whale.
Also, Brewster McCloud starts with Stacy Keach. You chose to start yours in English.
Should we take some questions? Got nothing.
The Yiddish is English-inflected Yiddish, right?
Oh man, we talked to so many Yiddishists, and it was vicious. They all said each other's translation was shit. We finally let the actors arbitrate. They're all two of them are from the Yiddish theater here in New York, and the third is Five-ish Finkel, and they're all. I could not judge.
Do you guys, when you're writing, generally, do you write from start to finish, or do you sometimes start with scenes in the middle, or and just thinking about beginnings? I mean, do you generally, when you wrote A Serious Man, did you write? We'll start with.
Yes, generally we start at the beginning, and in fact, it's a little hard to jump ahead or to not know what the beginning is for us. Not know what the beginning is, and then start somewhere in the middle. I mean, that isn't to say that you don't know. That isn't to say that you don't necessarily know what some of the scenes later on are, even in a fairly detailed way, or how the movie ends, or all the rest of it. But in terms of actually getting it down on paper, it's more common that it proceeds in a linear fashion that way.
Do you guys talk it through before you start writing?
Yeah, we talk to a certain extent, and it depends how great. It differs from movie to movie to what extent it's hashed out ahead of time, I would say. But this, I'm trying to think of how this came about, that we started in such a sort of radically indirect way. I mean, it is really striking again, because this is about as far as you can go in terms of misdirection. And at the beginning of The Squid and the Whale, it's amazing how much of the essence is all contained in those two little scenes that we saw, in terms of the characters. It's just remarkable, actually. But yeah, we generally, proceed, right at the beginning. And this one, I can't remember where it came in relationship to the shot from inside the head going towards the earpiece, and coming out in the Hebrew school.
Well, we started with the idea of sort of this setting, that it was going to be this community of Midwestern Jews. So in that sense, the idea to begin it with that sort of Yiddish folktale prologue came after we knew what the body of the movie would be. I mean, we didn't literally start with the Yiddish folktale and say what would follow this.
What I think is what's kind of great is how you, after this serious misdirect of the folktale, then it's thrilling how you go through the ear and end up in the earpiece with the Jefferson airplane. I mean, it's like you really it feels great.
Yeah, right. It's good. Yeah, it's a big.
Part of the fun, right? That we knew it would be fun to go make that transition. That was Right. We knew it would be fun to make that transition that you go, I'm here, and now I've gone through into some dark hole and come out here.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, people ask us why we started the movie with a folktale, but that's part of the reason. That feels good.
It feels great, and it really has that feeling once you come out the ear. I feel like this. I love this movie. That's like it just has such a great. Because it has everything.
Well, we also, yes. I mean, in terms of the transition itself, it was also interesting that we, that Jefferson Airplane song actually bangs in with, Grace Slick singing, and so we asked Carter to do something that would be this kind of just big ominous chord, but then transition into essentially a sort of a guitar intro for the song that doesn't actually exist on the song, to sort of make that, distend that, again, just in terms of the fun of going from one place to the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, the sound is amazing. That just the door opening and closing and the footsteps.
Yeah, that's actually one of many cases where that transition is one of many cases where Skip Levside, the sound designer, and Carter, both of whom have done all of our movies, frequently work together in places where they kind of have to. The sound environment has to work with the music, and one has to know what the other is doing. The Jefferson Airplane intro kind of comes out of a weird sound environment that Skip made.
Okay, yeah, I think that's all the time we have for you today. It's really great to talk to you guys in front of
Yeah,
people.
thanks, Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Doesn't matter. No, standing up, I guess. Because then we're almost the same height. Thanks. The flash worked for once. Hey. Thank you, guys.